So how long have you lived in Melbourne for?
All my life.
Transport is more efficient and effective for you to get to work?
To get to work, for me, is tram because
All the choices of transport that are available in tourists and locals, which do you believe needs to be improved and why?
So that's probably a bit hard because I only use the trams, but there's a lot of there's a lot of media and stuff about how bad the trains are.
The train system, is it efficient? Yes.
Yep.
When a major event is on?
Yeah, it is because they normally put a lot more trams on and will often run them kind of earlier and later than what they would normally. I mean, they're busier and sometimes a couple go past and you can't get a seat, but we use public transport to go to the footy and all of that sort of stuff, and it's usually pretty efficient. You got
Do you think the public transport system services major tourist attractions and events efficiently?
Events, yes, because they're mostly in Melbourne.
Do you believe that tourists have an impact on the use of transport?
Do they have an impact on the use of transport? So I suspect that they use public transport quite a bit, although I think with the new ticketing system it's pretty complicated for them. Are you guys using public transport?
Yeah.
You had to get a Mickey and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's just a pain in the neck, right? So particularly if you're only going to be here for 3 days. I don't think it's super efficient for tourists.
Should there be any improvements made on the transport stations themselves?
The transport stations. So the tram stops are tram stops, and so I don't know that they could really be improved. Although, as you'll be experiencing, or as you'll find out today, Melbourne can get pretty wet, and so maybe having some of them covered over.
Do you have any suggestions for other types of transport that should start up in Melbourne?
Well, I think a train to the airport would be a really good idea. So, I don't know if you know, there's a really efficient train from Sydney Airport into the CBD, and it's about a third the price of a taxi and twice as quick. So, I think something like that in Melbourne would be good.
Do you believe that the cost of transport is a decent price?
What it would be, $7 a day for me to and from work. So maybe a little bit more than $7, but not much more than $7. So I mean, compare that to parking in the city, which would be $50 or $60 a day. So for me, I think it's reasonable. Yeah.
So going back to the Myki card, if I was a tourist, do you think it would be easier for me to use a Myki card or to just buy a ticket?
To just buy a ticket. Yeah, or they probably should just make it free.
Do you use your own form of transport as well?
Yeah, so I drive to work sometimes.
Do you believe it is important to have public transport in Melbourne, and then why do you think that?
So I think it is important because if everyone had to drive to the city for work, they'd never get here because the traffic would be so bad.
And what are some benefits of public transport?
Well, aside from those two already, it's inexpensive. For me, it's really quite convenient because, as I said, the tram runs past my house and past my office, which I didn't plan for that, but that's just how it worked out. Depending on the time of day, it's quick. So, in peak hour, it's quicker to get on the tram or get on the train than it is. It's inexpensive. For me, it's really quite convenient because, as I said, the tram runs past my house and past my office. Depending on the time of day, it's quick.
And what is your opinion of the safety of public transport, and do you have any improvements for the safety of this?
So again, for me, generally, it's pretty safe. But trams tend to be safer, I think, than trains, because when you're on a tram, there's a driver.
Do you think that the public transport is easy to use by people who are visiting the city, and why?
Except for having to buy a Mikey, I would have thought. So I mean, it's pretty. I would have thought it's pretty straightforward.
Do you believe the more trams should be put on to decrease the time intervals between each arrival?
No. I mean, so again, from personal experience, there's more than enough. Yeah.
And finally, do you think the public transport stations should have visual signage to help anyone to navigate their way around?
Yeah. So particularly for tourists and people who don't use public transport a lot,